Will introduce our guest. Wow, I could not stay seated for that. That was amazing. Wonderful job. Thank you. It's great to be here in person, to see so many faces and friends. I just wanted to recognize some of the guests that we have here today. Sherry Burke, and if you'll just give a wave or stand up briefly. Sherry Burke, guest of Jason Burke. Diana Nin, guest of Laura Holloway. Vancer Mang, guest of Laura Holloway. Pat Schaefer, guest of Greg Silver. Jeff Parker, guest of Max Harper. Abby Myers, guest of Jason Burke. Not sure, did John make it, Bob?
Not yet.
Okay, well, if you see a man walk in, it's John Spinogle, guest of Bob Spinogle. Katie Steele, guest of Don Steele. Ann Valentine, guest of Greg Fennick. Karen Young, guest of David Young. And I happen to share that the governor was speaking today with a few folks. My daughter, Madison Kozlowski. Colette Childress. Heather Coffey. Elise Maishala. Michael McQuillan. Thank you for being here.
Next, Vancer Mang, who is the Parameridian High School student who serves as Lieutenant Governor of the Capital Division of the Indiana District of Key Club International. Vancer, could you come to the podium briefly?
Hi, thank you for inviting me to such a special event. I wanted to say thank you to both Kiwanis and Ms. Holloway for inviting me. I'm so glad to be able to represent both my school, Parameridian High School, and Indiana District of Key Club today. I currently serve as a Lieutenant Governor for the Capital Division, and some of my roles include creating monthly newsletters and holding DCMs. As a Lieutenant Governor, I've learned how to prioritize my work. I've met new people from all around the state, and I've learned how to feel more confident in what I do. One of many things I love about Key Club is the diversity and inclusive environment and always feeling very welcome. Lastly, I'd like to say thank you again to Ms. Holloway and Kiwanis for allowing me to come talk and you guys today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The 51st governor of the state of Indiana, first elected in November 2016, was re-elected for a second term in 2020 with the most votes for governor in the history of Indiana. A lifelong Hoosier, Eric J. Holcomb is a veteran of the United States Navy. He served as the state's 51st lieutenant governor under Governor Mitch Daniels and is a former chair of the Indiana Republican Party. Under his leadership, a $1 billion program known as Next Level Connections has pushed forward major road projects, greater access to high-speed affordable internet, more nonstop flights to and from Indiana, and the largest funding of trails in Indiana history. Beginning in May 2018, Indiana achieved its first ever nonstop transatlantic flight from Indianapolis to Paris. He has met with officials and industry leaders in countries all over the world, and in fact was honored in 2018 as the International Center's International Citizen of the Year. Back in Indiana, Governor Holcomb, with bipartisan support, expanded pre-kindergarten for Hoosier kids and was honored with the Richard M. Fairbanks Circle of Hope Award for his investment in community-based efforts to combat the opioid crisis. He has led the way for the largest infrastructure investment in our state's history and was awarded the 2019 Year Trailblazer Award for his work with the growing tech industry in Indiana. Under Governor Holcomb, Indiana was the first state outside of California to participate in the Last Mile program dedicated to reducing recidivism by touching computer coding skills inside prisons. We Hoosiers are not alone in applauding the accomplishments of our governor. U.S. News and World Report ranked Indiana first in the nation in government efficiency. In an article appearing in Governing magazine, it was stated, Indiana's governor doesn't scream, doesn't threaten, and doesn't even complain. He just wins. Governor Holcomb.
We'll do a test. Is this okay?
Thank you, Don.
I warned the governor, I had some food poisoning last night, so I've got Duke Cadet and Steve Farrow standing in the wings just in case. And I'll just put a DNR right here. But several of our members have helped me work with the governor's staff the last couple of weeks, and this is going to be just more of an interview process. And instead of questions and answers from the floor today, and some of these, governor, are pretty darn broad. But Congress passed the American Rescue Plan, the American Rescue Plan Act back in March. I think it was 1.9 trillion. And the state of Indiana passed a budget that includes funding for infrastructure, helping small business, tourism, job creation. And if any of you read even a synopsis of this American Rescue Act, it was a little bit of everything. And so we had a lot of questions. Can you talk about that? And what can service clubs like Kiwanis do, and maybe one of the pipelines of the programs you're working with?
Well, thank you, Don. Is this on as well, or shall I raise my voice? How about now?
There you go.
Yeah, you know, if you think about where we were last year in March, April 2020, it's a much different picture. And so credit where credit's due, our federal partners assisted at exactly the right time. Think about how the state reacted. We pushed pause. We made a lot of cuts. Those have been restored as we reemerged, and then we passed one of the biggest budgets that the state's ever seen. And we're still, because of the session that we just came out of, we're still, and the work that the federal government is still working on, still determining where some funding is going to go. So this is kind of to be continued. It's not over by any stretch of the imagination. You're right. We were able to make record investments in key areas. You mentioned, or it was mentioned, education being 1.9 billion. So more than double what we were going into the session thinking about doing. Going into specifically and directly into K through 12. So we have a real opportunity to see, again, school corporations all over the state. Teacher pay raises is just an example. So we can catch up with the average in the Midwest. I want to be a top 3 contender on that front and attract teachers from surrounding states here. We were able to make record investments in infrastructure. We were on a roll, as was mentioned before, in trails and roads. When you stop and think about our budget for our roads and bridges now, we're at about a 3.6 billion a year. In 2017, we were 2.2 billion. So we were doing about 800 different projects a year around the state of Indiana, and now we're doing over 1,300. So we're really pushing INDOT to get a lot of projects completed, and that has some workforce issues that run parallel right alongside. When you stop and think about the investments that we made on the mental health front, 100 million. Stop and think about our workforce development programs, record investments there as well. And so now we see that there may be a transportation package come out of Washington, D.C. in addition. I was just earlier this week, a couple days ago, met with the Secretary of Commerce. This is an agency in Washington that was used to about 300 million traveling through it. Now they're talking about how do they spend $3 billion. So a much different picture, and I would happen to be Gina Raimondo. She's a former governor of Rhode Island. She's now the Commerce Secretary, passionate about workforce development, as am I. I happened to be her first meeting after she was Senate confirmed in the building. So you imagine all that time that's gone by, and now they're re-emerging too. She's got about 46,000 people that work for her, and felt like we were one of 6 people in that big building a couple of days ago. So a lot of, in terms of the budget, the pressure's on us now to deliver. There's not the excuse that, well, it's a priority, but we can't afford to meet the need. We can. And now it's execution time across the board. What Kiwanis can do, I happen to be always a member of Kiwanis. So I was a member at Vincent's, Indiana when I lived there. So I'm just very aware of all the good community Kiwanis does. So you're already doing it. And going through this last year, I mean, it's a trying time for a lot of people. It's the clubs and organizations and associations that I think really kind of held this thing together. I often get encouraged to continue doing the television update, the weekly update, and I'm looking for ways to do that. But that was, I think the number one thing that came out of that was it got us connected in ways that we never were before. Not just with the media, not just with the Indianapolis media, statewide, and organizations. All of a sudden, it's like they went to Oz and they pulled the curtain back and they got to meet state government as real people that came from just where they came from. They weren't just titles. And so people got to know Fred Payne and Dr. Box. And I mean, Dr. Box can't go anywhere in public right now without getting a question. But, where are we? And so that was a really positive thing to come out of it. And then we got to ask people, what do you need? In a personal, direct way, And so I would say more of that. And then there are some programs, the READY program, which if we don't get to it in this interview, I'll force my way into it. And I would say that would be an ideal way for your expertise, because I know people are virtually at every table, for your expertise to be part of the conversation.
The state and the city have worked hard the past couple of decades to retain and to grow young talent, as well as attracting people in business investment. What's the future look like from economic development perspective in large metropolitan areas, especially like Indy and Fort Wayne, as well as smaller, more rural communities?
Well, I'm going to force my way into the READY program right now. That's the perfect teed it up perfectly, because that's what that READY initiative is all about, is talent attraction and retention, recruitment, how we grow our small cities and small towns and big cities. I was in Knightstown yesterday, by the way, and they were very bullish on their future. They had talked about over this last year, believe it or not, they had seen a 7% increase in their population. They said, now this is our goal going forward. Manage it, not all of a sudden surge, but manage it in a very responsible way going forward. But they want to grow, and they're doing it project by project by project. And they're working with us as partners, the state as partners with the local community to do that. And so I'm very bullish. This is what the READY program is. People have often described it, and the idea came from the regional cities. They often describe it as regional cities part 2, but that's a gross understatement of what it is. This is really, it would be more accurate to say regional cities times 4 plus, because that regional cities initiative was a competition around the state of Indiana. 3 different regions secured an award for $42 million. So Evansville, that region, Fort Wayne, that region, and South Bend, that region. Fort Wayne's region is 11 counties, South Bend was 3 counties. So they don't just have to be more than 1 county that came together. Again, designed to address population scarcity. So not just about South Bend, but a community in Marshall County, a small town in Marshall County. So the Blueberry Festival, all of a sudden, is just as important as Notre Dame. And we don't need 2 airstrips, in 3 counties that are of equal length. So that was wildly successful, internationally recognized. That 42 million, 126 million total converted into 1.2 billion because there's a match. There's a municipal or philanthropic corporate match. So imagine what 500 million all across the state of Indiana. Contemplate maybe 10 different regions, not 3, but 10 at 50 million, equating to, times 4. And so very exciting that type of investment's going to occur here in the state of Indiana, coming out of the end of this year, going into next year, as we continue to really accelerate away from 2020. And the economic indicators show that we are. And we had a record number of new job commitments in 2020 during the global pandemic coming through the record. So 31,300 new job commitments at about $30 an hour average, 5.6 billion in CapEx. So we didn't take the day off. I mean, we were, multitasking. We were doing a lot of 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. phone calls all over the world saying, we can't be there in person, but what do you need? Not asking for anything other than how can we help? And you're going through a tough time, so are we. We'll go through it together. What can we do? And what we learned, that was very well received, and then people were making investments. So we had again, on a new job commitment front, a record year. Now put that in perspective, this year, at June 12th, last year, we were at 12,000 new job commitments. We're at 18,000 June now. So we closed strong the second half of the year. So we're way out front of where we were last year as confidence around the world, around the country, around our state continues to rise. So again, and I could probably ask every single person in this room, can you find help, in business? And that's probably the number one question I get everywhere I go. So that's put pressure over there as well. And we're learning how to adjust, to be nimble and agile. As a state, help on that. So very, very bullish. Skies are limit.
Kind of a follow-up as we all reopen. I was talking to your staff when I was in Florida over the winter, and you probably heard this. Indiana and West Virginia were in the newspaper every day saying the right things about it because they're basically frustrated. How come we can't get our vaccines down here in Florida? And it took me 2 months. I'd had mine done in 2 weeks. But so we've seen, the distribution system of the COVID vaccines. But in Indiana, how's the progress on that front? And how can we encourage more people to get the vaccine?
Yeah. It's Mary. Mary says she had three children and sisters, 3 sisters in 3 different states, and she heard the very same thing. I heard this for months on end as our process was developing and rolling out, including my parents who were in Florida as well. Decided to. It's interesting. So I was sworn into my second term, and my parents the next day went to Florida to avoid the cold, but they delayed it to see me sworn in as if maybe it wasn't going to happen. And the only thing my mother said is, "Surprised you still have that beard for today." She thought it was going to come off. But I'm a stubborn Taurus, and she raised me. So, I think about that day. The very next day, it was opened up to her age group, but they were in Florida. And they thought, okay, we'll just take care of this in Naples or wherever. It was maddening, the experience that my father was describing, being on his cell phone, being on his laptop, being on his iPad, trying to play the gambler or something, trying to get on one of these platforms. And then I had people calling me from Florida saying, we're going to just can you help me get scheduled? Like it's really easy. I mean, I've gone on, I've done this. But yeah, we can help, but do this. And they call right back and say, no, got scheduled for Tuesday, I'm flying back on Monday, and then that was easy, but that was easy. And, but we heard it, and we benefited because we used the same company that had been testing, conducting all of our tests. And then we have a homegrown company here, Zotec, originally from Shelbyville, another family-owned and grown business that has kept pace. And I'm getting a little far off field here, but that's because we went with two organizations that we had been working with that were scaling up and enjoy that continuity and all the data that came from it. It's going to help us in 17 different other ways as we look at characteristics and profiles of people who are looking for work. What's their training status? What's their health status? Because health is wealth, quite frankly. And so it's pretty exciting to see how data is going to enter into the discussion outside of what we went through over this last year. But to answer your question more directly, and the second part of your question is how do we, go from 53% to 63% to 73%, knowing that we're over 2.7 million Hoosiers who have received that first dose at least, 12 and above, and we want more. Obviously, we've had over 757,000 Hoosiers who have been COVID positive, so that also factors in there. Our rate went down, the positivity rate went down today to 2.2%. So we're in a place where we are having to manage our way through this. We're still managing our way through this. You get reports out of Joplin, Missouri. You get reports out of Sydney, Australia that give you concern, and the variants do give us a concern. But we also know that since January, 98.5% of all positive COVID cases, 98.5 are unvaccinated. And that number tells me everything. I mean, it tells me everything. And so part of it takes two to tango, right? Part of this is on you. That's kind of the tough love part of this. But we have to do everything we can to persuade. What I have seen, and I talk to governors all over the country, including the ones that want to be Ed McMahon and pass out big checks, and I've been a little unpopular because I haven't gone there, but I just have some concerns about tax dollars going to some that, especially while this is still emergency use authorized, and there are people who are concerned with it, and they're waiting for that moment too, and so to distribute tax dollars, I'm just a little hesitant about that. And I've talked to governors who have said it doesn't really have any long lasting effect. You might get some people that turn out. First Lady Biden was in Nashville yesterday with Brad Paisley, a very popular country singer. They had at a encouraging people to get vaccinated. They had 10 people. 10 later. And so this is not, so what I have learned and what we continue to encourage is to make it very convenient. It's free. So the cost, we've taken that off the table, but make it accessible. We'll come to your house. We'll pay for the Lyft or Uber or to get you vaccinated. But the most influential persuaders are folks that you're around. Because it does break my heart when we see someone who is hospitalized or passes away because of COVID, and knowing that they were unvaccinated, knowing that if they were vaccinated, odds are much different that they would still be with us. So, I mean, we're well over 13,000 people that we've lost, and that does weigh on you. But we know that coaches have a very influential position in our business owners have a very influential position that says we want to remain open, we want to compete but win, and we need to be part of the team. So we'll continue to try to get it on the ground, up close and personal, and knowing that the supply is there. We just need to continue.
Shift to another kind of tough topic. How is the state addressing some of the issues with infant mortality, addiction, and mental health? That could be the speaker for about 20 minutes.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
we'll adjourn Tuesday. These are three huge topics. Um, and to me, I don't ever lose sight of, we always, as we started, how important our economic growth is to these topics. Meaning, we can do more if our economy is growing. So every time you talk about, you know, a good tax and regulatory environment and employment, these mean something to what are we going to be able to do to help bring down our infant mortality. Set a big, high goal on the first topic you raised, infant mortality and maternal mortality too, infant mortality. And said we got to be best in the Midwest by 2024. We were a lack. We were way, and had been for years and years and years and years. Now we have it at the lowest in Indiana recorded history. Recorded history, going back to 1900, across every demographic, by the way. And again, this is another example of grinding it out, kind of common sense, but getting on the ground and helping those who want help, but on the ground, with real people, getting personal about it. And it has to do with the OB Navigator program. It has to do with My Healthy Baby program. It has to do with being there, not just temporarily, but before, during, and after, or long after, or to help educate, be there during the whole process. And it's working. And so we initially, and I'm not talking about Tuesday about this because I could, I'm passionate about it. But I mean, we have seen what works, and we're trying to do more of what works and less of what doesn't. And so we started into the top 20 counties. We looked at the zip codes, we heat mapped the whole state and said, where do we got to go first? It's not going to be only where we go. We did 20 counties. We're adding 25 counties this year. Actually, coming up next month, we'll start to onboard 25 more counties. That's 45, and then ultimately we'll be in all 92 counties address the need. And you can see 13 different zip codes around the state where the majority was, but it is everywhere. So it's not just Marion or Lake County or Allen or Evansville. It's Jay County. It's just, you got to fill those needs as different as they are. You mentioned addiction and mental health. Same thing on addiction. Again, could talk till Tuesday, but got to reduce the stigma. We're working on that. We gotta make sure that folks understand there's more than just hope. If they want to recover, oftentimes it's harder to get someone to stay on the road to recovery than it is to get them on the road to recovery. We've all been, probably you could go to every table here. You could, someone personally who struggled with either addiction or mental health issues. I'm certainly in that category. And so what have we done? We made sure that, again, kind of like the vaccination process, that it's more convenient, less costly, which means we went out and worked, meaning Dr. Waffle and Sullivan and Dr. Box and others, Allison Taylor, folks who have been working on this for years and years and years and years, and finally got a waiver, federal waiver on our Medicaid program that's now has the ability to cover 1.6 million users, which was something that was kind of pricing us out of help in some circumstances. And we've increased beds 160% just since I was sworn in the first time, and that is helping. Now, having said that, I was so happy about where we were pre-pandemic, and we just seen an erosion of so much progress. So that's one of those. How do we double down on what was working and then deal with all the new scenarios? And fortunately, out of this budget as well, I mentioned very quickly, kind of walked over it, but we've devoted $100 million to mental health out of this budget. This is something else I was talking about with some folks in Washington, D.C. a couple of days ago. Just the tail of the pandemic can kill just as much as that pandemic. So we're being, clear-eyed about this and making sure we're moving, empowering the agencies to do their job, listening to the experts. Just one thing that you could criticize me for during the pandemic, but I was listening to scientists and doctors and the folks that have been through these type of things before, maybe not on that scale, but that's what we'll continue to do here. But it's my job to make sure those agencies have the resources that they need to move the needle in a positive direction. And that's what we continue to do, have more programs at work, and staff up to be able to connect to the people who are wanting the help.
Another big shift with the National Guard hopefully coming home from almost 19 years. The global war on terror goes back to early 2002, but for 19 years of service overseas, how does the state support them and others who have served in uniform as they transition back to Indiana?
Yeah. Yeah, we're over 12,000 as well. We're at a force level of over 12,000. And they've been scattered, Slovakia, Niger, Middle East, our nation's capital during the protests. They're back as a and during the pandemic, as they were scattered all over the world, then we asked them, we need you to be in every nursing home in the state of Indiana, long-term care center in the state of Indiana. And they, saluted and went. Some were reluctant, not them, not the ones wearing the uniform, but some were reluctant to receive them, probably wondering if they were aware of all that goes into. And 1 week into it, they didn't want to leave. They were hugging them. They were saying thank you. They were saying we're getting stuff done that we weren't able to do before. Every governor in the country can't express the positive impact that the Guard units had in their states, Indiana and no exception. And so what do we do? Obviously, when they're coming back from their duty and they're going back to their lives and families who have sacrificed just as much, we have to make sure that they do have opportunity here, which there is. And there's, again, various programs. I need to be generic about it, but invest.org is a perfect example of, and one of the best in the country, of connecting our men and women in uniform with occupational opportunity in all of our key sectors, whether it be life sciences or advanced manufacturing or tech or construction or advanced manufacturing. I mean, you name it, they're on it. The good news is there is that opportunity. The other thing is, and Bob Spinogle is with us, and we've got, Bob, I think, the only in the nation one-stop shop at 777, building 777, where anyone in uniform who has served this nation can walk in there. I mean, it's just steps away from where we are now, American Legion headquarters. You walk through that front door and you will get directed on where and what and how to get the help that you need. And now, that's not taking anything away from the local help that's maybe in every courthouse or around the state of Indiana. But we do have this coordinated state and local partnership that I think is more efficient to address mental health, to address unemployment, to address, and that's what we have to make sure. The other part of it is not just access, but it's awareness. And we have to make sure that folks are aware help is available.
Governor, we're down to a few minutes here, and we'll turn it back over to Judge Carroll in a second, but what are your most pressing goals now for the rest of your term?
Well, they revolve around what we talked about today. I mean, these aren't slogan topics or bumper sticker topics. These are things that we got to get right, not just now, but long term. We got to be planning for 2030 and well beyond. And the decisions that we make today will affect where we are in 2030. clarity, whether we're in the game or not, whether we're making progress or not, whether we have that momentum or not. I will say that just in general, I want us to be increasingly top state, not just in the Midwest, but in the nation for entrepreneurship. I want us to increasingly be in ranking high in terms of the creation or the idea, the research and development stage of products. We knock it the cover off the wall when it comes to manufacturing in America in terms of manufacturing per capita. Obviously, logistics and transportation powerhouse, being a hub and crossroads of America. I want us to move into competing every single day on the research and development side of this. And you're seeing us make investments on that front too, venture capital access, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That'd be one. I want to make sure we're leading in terms of renewable energy. It's interesting, and that transition, I celebrate. We've been the #1 steel producer state, #1 steel producing state in America for 40 years. We produce about 28% of the nation's steel. It's amazing. We're building the buildings in Chicago and LA and New York and Cincinnati and Indianapolis, and I want to continue to do that. I'm proud of our heritage. Having all of the above strategy. I want to make sure our air and water, soil is cleaner than it's ever been. And I want to be a leader in the very interesting. Hear more about this later. You're starting to see it, and everyone has an opinion about this. I went over to Israel about a month ago, I guess, by now, before the race. And while there, I was there for a different reason, but someone reached out and said, I can't believe the governor of Indiana is on Israeli soil. I'd like to meet him. And we were only there for one night. And slept on the plane going, slept there one night. And I said, I'd love to meet the individual, but we leave at 12:45 a.m. And he said, well, I have a home in Jaffa, which is Tel Aviv. And he's the governor's got to eat. So I'll make dinner, I'll serve dinner. And long story short, he had his whole business come in. This individual is building the biggest solar farm in the world. And it's about a $1.5 billion investment, 15,000 acres. And 9,000 acres and 6,000 acres. And he just wanted to say how enjoyable it was working with all the local and state officials. And so you'll see that announced in probably July. And it's already in the public domain, but so we'll increasingly move in that. We got to make sure that I could give you a top 10 list, but cybersecurity, very, very important private public sectors. We know what's going on out there and what's being talked about, but when you stop and think that your prescription meds can be changed at the pharmacy, so what they see on the screen is different, or their plane's landing, and that can be changed from somewhere in some basement around the world. The scenarios are endless and scary, and we have to make sure that it's not just a ransom for money scenario. The energy group, and coach worried about every single day of his life. So and it's just gotten more and more out there. So there's some areas in workforce development. I mentioned health as well. We got to make sure we're getting healthier, and we got to make sure that we're skilling up the population for the jobs of tomorrow as much as today. And that's going to take some courage and conviction by many, not just me. So again, the topics that you asked about, now it's we got to deliver for not just 3 years, but the next 30. Super.
If we all join me in thanking the governor for this time today. Navy veterans, we behaved pretty well.
We did.
We did. Judge Carroll will turn this back.
And no
over.
Army judge.
I know. Yeah, we'll get Spinoza later. We'll get, yeah.
First of all, of course, I'd like to thank you, Governor Holcomb, for joining us for this very interesting, stimulating discussion that you have had with us. We've learned a lot, and we look forward to everything else that you are bound to do in the remainder of your term as governor. We'd like to thank you with a certificate of appreciation for your time with us. We are going to make a donation in your name to Trinity Haven. Trinity Haven provides long-term housing to LGBTQ plus youth who would otherwise encounter homelessness. The first of its kind home in Indianapolis opened in 2020. We'll see everyone back at the Columbia Club on July 8th. And Governor, once again, thank you so much for joining us today.